Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with last week's theme of favorite moments, moving on into the band SUNN. I always want to say SUNN O. We're going to be looking at the track Frost C. I don't really understand the lettering, but I did notice that all 4 tracks on this album have a letter after them. I don't understand what it's for. Maybe some of y'all can clue me into that. We're going to be looking at this Frost track. It was requested because starting around 50 seconds in, you can really feel the atmosphere almost like a vibration. All right. Let's dive into this, see what SUNN is bringing to the table today. I think those are just swirling overtones, but they almost sounded like American police sirens. But they rise too high in pitch, so where I'm like, okay, definitely not sirens, but there's a range between the highest and the lowest that kind of embodies that sound. The texture is right, although now it kind of sounds like howling winds cutting through trees and whistling. interesting. I felt a sort of apathy early on, something that simply existed without feeling. Almost a factual description of some sort of phenomenon, but here it seems to have taken a dark, sinister tone. I'm looking at the information over here, and the volume all the way over there is just solid, locked there at the top, but right here, this is really interesting. There, of course, is variance at the different ranges, but it is also incredibly consistent, too. I think that is some of the closest to static visualization that I've seen. It's also kind of shaped like a cello, which is kind of cool. Half of a cello. Anyways, just imagine it's reflected on the other side of that, the bar. It's already been 9 minutes, give or take, something around that. This note is being held. Why can't I place the sounds? Around here, center rightish. It's interesting because it kind of dropped into a pedal tone. I felt a sense of resolution despite not really picking up a lot of harmonic information on this track. Well, to clarify that, of course I'm picking up harmonic information. There is multiple notes existing throughout a lot of this. But as far as chord progressions and such, I don't really have an understanding of that. It moves too slowly for me to grasp any larger context other than the moment. So I find it interesting that a pedal tone of any sort, a return to the home notes, registered at all for me. All right. I find this interesting that it was selected for favorite moments. It's quite possible that someone more familiar with drone metal in general, but maybe even just this track, finds distinct moments in it. And I will agree that the song kind of picks up around that 50-second mark, and that's when the song becomes the song. It sort of takes that first minute to wind up into the full sound. But aside from that, this is a single concept. I don't really feel moments in this track. I don't feel distinct sections. It is an 11-minute experience. So I find that that's actually kind of been a recurring thing. I don't know, this week I feel it's been less about specific moments. I think I'm gonna have to I don't know, maybe Friday. I'll try to put something together today and solidify it soon so that y'all have well, I don't know. I want to take some of the selections from my patrons who gave me very distinct moments, like 3 to 325 or something in a song, and go and look at some of these moments in isolation without the context of the full track, maybe a few seconds before or after. I just think it's really interesting that this week most of what I got was the vibes of this are good. I enjoy that. And yeah, dude, some of these tracks have had cool vibes, but it's less about distinct moments in tracks. That's kind of what I was aiming for with this theme. And there were a lot of people who submitted very specific moments. And this one, like I mentioned, it's not inaccurate. They did mention a specific time in the track. And I do think that there was something interesting there, but it was also, in a sense, the same as everything else. It's the part of the journey of this song. I want to find a way to go through the rest and maybe put them together in a montage video, just kind of rapid fire go through a few and give my thoughts on how they sound. I know it loses the context of the whole track, but I still think that would be kind of interesting, especially since there are a lot of requests I'm seeing where I'm kind of interested by the description and the relationship to these moments and the fact that there's a very distinct part of the track that they wanted me to check out. All right. Let's actually talk about this song. What I would bring up without the context of it being tied to a theme. This is a journey. This is an experiential track. It's drone metal. You're here for the moment-to-moment evolution of what the sound is doing. You're not really here for riffs or melodies, sick rhythms. This is an ever-evolving slow burn of long, drawn-out notes. What I found most interesting about this, because we've had SUNN on the channel before, as well as bands like Earth, probably some other drone too that's just not popping up in my head at the moment. But what I think is interesting about this one is that it's abstract art, I think, at its core, but the longer I listened to it, the more it seemed to want to tell me something, and I felt like I was consistently on the cusp of understanding, of interpretation, and just as I'm about to get an answer of what it's trying to do, my brain begins to drift and I get lost in all the swirling patterns of it all over again. That doesn't usually happen to me with drone. Sometimes it can be a bit hypnotic, sure. Puts me into a bit of a trance. I think that happened during Golden Faceted. Actually, it's not Earth, it's Earth 2. That's the band. But yeah, we checked out Golden Faceted, which was like 30 minutes of noise. And I think I did drift a bit in that, which, it's half an hour of statics. It's not even really static. That's the interesting thing about drone. Compared to traditional music, yes, this stands still, but it really doesn't. There's a lot of nuance from second to second. There's always something changing. It's just not the typical catchy melodies or infectious drum beats or, bouncy bass lines or anything. It is more abstract. But I did find myself gaining emotional knowledge, narrative knowledge out of this. Or at least it felt like I could have if it didn't slip through my fingertips at the last second. I wonder what a second listen would grant me. But I also don't think that a second listen right now would do much more than what I got out of a first time. I think this is something that I would need some time away from and sort of have a bit of a cleanse, a palate cleanse. Not necessarily to forget it entirely, maybe even just a couple of days away from it, but certainly some time between listens. Come in semi-fresh, remembering some of the elements of it that stood out, but forgetting the details and seeing what they say to me on a second time through. But I did find a lot of it to be matter-of-factly apathetic, not really based around emotion, but simply stating things. It felt like something simply existing. And I had mentioned during the reaction, I found it interesting then when a part came in and it felt kind of sinister, as if the song noticed me and was unhappy about my presence. It's a bit daunting to be in the presence of something so large. And this song is massive. To hide, to be ignored by that, and then to be spotted. That's kind of terrifying. And that was an interesting moment for me. That's really the only time in this track that I think it really spoke to me in a way that I got. Because a lot of this track ends up feeling foreign in a language that maybe I'm picking up on intonation elements or body language, but I don't recognize the words. It's a language I don't speak. I can kind of intuit what it's doing, but it's all done through the lens of my experiences, which may not be applicable to this culture. The way that they inflect or emphasize specific syllables, the type of grit or extra oomph they might put in specific parts of their sentence might sound angry to me, but is more standard for this. The body language they have may feel closed off to me, but isn't in this culture. And that's where the misinterpretations could be coming in. And I felt that through this entire track. I do have some vague feeling of it, but am I misinterpreting what it's saying entirely? I keep coming back to the title though. Frost Sea. I'm going to ignore the C right now. There's other letters I mentioned on the album. Just go over this quickly. Track 2 is Kingdoms G. Track 3 is Ampliphades. Maybe that's it. E. And track 4 is Ascension A. The letters mean nothing to me, and I'm really curious what they mean to SUNN, and maybe even more curious, does this combine with another album? Do we find other letters following titles on other albums? Can we put them in some sort of order and form a story through all of the albums? I don't know. I'm going to ignore it though. It feels supplementary to it. Though, once again, it may just be that I don't understand the language they're speaking to me in. But thinking about Frost, this is not a track I think speaks to me. Ice, maybe. I think of ice caps as these massive, gigantic, larger than life things to be in the presence of these walls of ice would feel small and daunting. I could see that angle, but for Frost, not so much. It could also be that I'm being informed by the parts of the music video I paid attention to, although honestly it all seemed very similar to me. It's a lot of long shots over landscapes, mountains. Not a lot of Frost going on in what I saw of the music video. I do think that the music matches this idea of a planet, maybe even Earth. I don't know if this was CGI or not. I wasn't paying that much attention to it. It could just be drone shots of the planet we all live on. If you don't live on this planet, hello from Earth. How did you get this transmission? And I could see this slow, heavy, earthy movement to that. But again, where does Frost tie into this? I don't know. Once again, I extend the microphone out to y'all. How do you feel the title relates to this? Do you have any additional information for what it might supposed to represent in parallel to the music? And what does the C mean? What do all the letters mean? I don't know. I'm very curious about it, though. SUNN is a band that continues to spark my curiosity despite my lack of understanding and even at times enjoyment. And I say that because I don't think I enjoyed this, as is pretty typical for drone music. I do find it interesting that people will write music like this. I have made one song in my entire life that could be like this, and it wasn't necessarily done through the process that I wager most drone artists do. I had found a program that stretched music out. I believe it was called Paul Stretch, but this was like 20 years ago. Actually, I think Paul Stretch is still around. I think I brought this up before and someone was like, nah, dude, that program's still around. I think even updated. But anyways, it takes music and stretches it out. If you had a 2-minute song, you can stretch it to 15. It just slows everything down without distorting it. And so I wrote a string trio, string quartet. I actually don't remember. And I applied this stretch to it to see what would happen. And before I even knew what drone music was, this is what I ended up creating, was something akin to this, incredibly slow moving. I find it really interesting that in the case of most drone metal bands, they play this music live, which means they create it in real time, rather than my process, which was to create it much faster and slow it down to drone. It's something that they explore from moment to moment with purpose. And that really blows my mind, because much like electronic music is interesting to me because it is limitless and expansive. You can make any sounds you want out of synthesizers and patches and all sorts of effects and all of that. This is limitless in what you can explore. When you slow down a song so far, you spend so much time with texture that you don't in other forms of music. Something like this ends up being incredibly textured. It's one of the things that I think develops the most in this track. Sure, you do have harmonic movement. Notes do move, but so slowly. What actually moves at a rapid pace is the rumbling, the grumbling, the static popping of the distortion and the amplification. All of these destructive tones becoming the minutia of change. Things that can be controlled to an extent, but not completely. There is, in essence, for making something like this, a giving up to chaos. Of saying that I can compose parts of this track, but not others. And whatever ends up coming out in the recording is going to be part me and part whatever the electronics choose to do. I'm fascinated by giving up that level of control, but also how it informs so much of the experience. Of the subtle, I'm going to assume some sort of automated, probably through a pedal of sorts, rising and falling of a low pass filter on a guitar, just ever so slightly changing the texture, the timbre of it. Again, the crackling, the texture of the track, of the instrument continuing to just pop and fizz all over the place while this single note is held out. All the performer has done is strummed, and yet there's so much movement on the microcosm of this chord for several seconds. In a sense, it reminds me of those pendulum paintings. I don't know what you would call them, where they take a can of paint, suspend it from the ceiling, put a little hole into it, and then swing it and allow physics to have it rotate around the floor where there's a paper, and it creates cool patterns. There is control to it, but also entropy. You have given up your artistic input to the physics here. You've put thought into it. You understand how to somewhat control it, just like having all these effects pedals and overdrive and amplification, but the end result, you still just kind of strum the guitar and see what comes out of it. Controlled chaos on a micro level. I think the last thing I want to bring up is something I touched on in the reaction itself. There was a specific point, not before this moment and not after this moment. In essence, this is my moment for the song. I found it most surprising. Of course, lots of notes going on in this track. It's so slow moving that it's tough to get a grasp on chordal movements. It's tough to get a grasp on key, kind of scale we're in. Any of that information. Everything moves so slowly, it simply just is. But at a certain point, some higher pitched guitar tones dropped. Half of an octave, maybe 70% of an octave, and hit a tone that felt restful, felt at ease. This is usually the feeling associated with the home note or the root tone. It's where rest and resolution happens on the harmonic scale. You don't have any of the tension introduced from less stable note intervals. You've returned back to the bass note. There's always rest here, and that's what I felt. But in order to feel that, I would need to contrast it against tensor ideas. We need to move through a chordal progression in order to return home. But I don't know where I've been. I don't know where I've come from. None of this song harmonically makes sense journey-wise to me because of the slowness of it all. And yet I still felt resolution here. I waited. This was probably about 7-8 minutes into the track. I didn't know there were only a few left, but I waited to see if maybe it came back around. Maybe I could find some sort of phrasing to this track. Maybe I could feel out an elongated chord progression. But this feeling of rest never came back. This was a singular moment in the track for me. How do I understand something that requires context when I don't understand the context. This blew my mind. It could simply be that we had some very tense ideas leading up to it for quite some time, and this was a moment when all the notes lined back up. I suppose that would give the same feeling. It also implies a sense of home, though. It implies there has been harmonic information throughout. As slow as this song's been, as almost imperceptible as the movement has been for me on a conscious level, subconsciously, I have felt the journey. I've never had this, I think, in another drone track, and it makes me wonder if I can go back to any of those and find moments like this. Maybe just having more exposure to this type of slow-moving music. Maybe just, I don't know, giving myself up to the art at times. If I could find more ideas like this in it, maybe I've missed them in the past due to the analytical nature of how I listen to music in this setting. I'm curious how I would respond to this track. Lights off, headphones on, not in front of a camera, not recording, just feeling. These are my thoughts on Frost by SUNN. I'm going to say SUNN O again. I can't ignore it. Oh man, what are your thoughts on this though? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? I posed quite a few questions during this reaction. If you have answers to them, your own interpretation or perspective, please let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.